Hello fellow YouTubers, and welcome to episode 8, reading my first self-published novel, Aggravation. Seated at his desk, the computer booted up, memory stick plugged in, he moved the pointer to the My Computer icon, double-clicked, waited for the external drive icon to appear, double-clicked it when it did, then he waited, hoping, praying, that the sisters had got it right. He didn't have long to wait, and sure they had. And it began such. These are not the diaries of follies and fancies as I, Harriet, and I, Henrietta MacArthur, had once thought we would keep, but rather ones of events so despicable and obscene, and of the strange beyond all reason. Jesus, Clyde muttered. Yet it wasn't until Sunday, May 8, 1932, the day after we celebrated our 12th birthdays, did we decide to write of which we shouldn't have to write. About it all. Even though it had started when we were but little girls. Perhaps we thought, and feared because of it, that Mother would discover our writings, and beat us for being children, not born of her womb, but born of Satan. For only such in her eyes could write such disgusting things. But as the years slowly passed, as they always do when young, we became confident that we could keep the debauchery secret, if not able to prevent it from happening. Little did we know that Mother had known about it from the very beginning. No wonder they didn't want any family photographs in the house, Clyde said. And in the beginning it had started harmlessly. A father bathing his two young girls. The touching of our private parts a natural occurrence, and one that, as little girls of 3, made us giggle and laugh and splash about, and so different to the scrubbing that Mother subjected us to. And when Mother refused to bath us any more, for we were, after all, big girls now at 5, Father still did, and we thought nothing of it, looking forward to it knowing that he cared and loved us. At least we thought it was love, for what else could it be? 2 little girls so innocent and naive we thought everything Mother and Father did for and to us was because they loved us. When Mother beat us for any indiscretion in her eyes, she said she did so because she loved us and we would thank her later in our lives for the valuable lessons she had taught us. But we never did. We never thanked Father for his beatings either, but he never said we would. He too told us that he loved us, often, so much that he wanted to eat us. And he had tickled us and made us giggle, and we were certain that he did. And when, as he often did, run a finger ever so slowly on our private parts, he would always tell us that he loved us, and would always ask if we liked what he did. But we were confused and didn't know. And because we didn't know, he would always tickle us and make us giggle. An answer that wasn't, but one that brought a smile to his face, the answer he wanted to hear. We had no thoughts that it wasn't proper, for we were too young to know such things. Nor did that change as we grew older. So commonplace his actions were that we thought it must be normal. Even when that finger he caressed us with penetrated us for the first time and we bled and screamed and cried, he patted our heads and reassured us, saying it was the release of the demon blood, and from now on we would be safe from demonic possession. And we had believed him. And Mother had done and said nothing. He had tucked us into bed that night, only returned several minutes later with 2 cups of hot chocolate that, unbeknown to us, he had added an opiate. And as we had sipped, as he told us a story as he waited for the narcotic sleep he knew would quickly come. Oh my God, Clyde muttered. Those poor little girls. Sitting back in his chair, hands resting on his lap, fingers knitted, he thought out loud, What sort of deviant was their father, for Christ's sake? Molestation, physical abuse, brainwashing, administering drugs. Did this man know no boundaries? And what of their mother? Why, she's as guilty as he for sanctioning it all with her silence and total lack of intervention. What was wrong with the bloody woman? Did he drug her too? Or was she one of those women who thought sex with a husband was a disgusting thing, and she was only too happy they would able to get his satisfaction with the twin girls? The twins she carried for 9 months that maybe she didn't want at all, from one of the few copulations she had surrendered to as part of the conjugal rights her husband had insisted were his. Clyde was aware that what he said was conjecture, but it struck an all too familiar chord with him, thinking of his own mother as he sat staring at the monitor. Then all of a sudden another thought occurred to him, so ridiculous it was that he almost dismissed it. Waving a hand like shooing a fly, he muttered, "Nah, not possible, no way." Then, "Not possible," he said with mock incredulity. "Not possible, not possible? Of course it's possible, Clyde, old son. After all, we are dealing with the supernatural here, so anything is possible. Anything at all. So go on, get it off your chest, spit it out, and let's see what it sounds like." Following a brief pause to gather his thoughts, he said, "Maybe, just maybe, and I don't know how, but somehow the sisters knew we had a common bond with each other as far as a mother who didn't want us. And again, somehow they knew I, or someone like me, would come along and buy the house. After all, there must be countless numbers of people who have that same bond. There, what do you think about that?" he asked himself. It all made perfect sense to Clyde, at least perfect sense considering the circumstances. There were, however, still lots of questions to be answered, so much to know and be lightened about. But just as he commenced reading again, there were 3 quick raps on the front door, and as he stood he grumbled, "I hope that isn't Charlie." "Louise," he said, genuinely surprised and delighted. "Good morning, Clyde," she said. "I finished your bust then." Come in," he said, gesturing with a hand, his heart aflutter. "How wonderful to see you," as he ushered her down the hallway toward the kitchen. "It's a beautiful old house," Louise commented, stepping into the kitchen. "It is," Clyde replied with a smile, thinking then, "and it's haunted too." Placing the covered bust on the kitchen table, Louise stood her ground looking around, in 2 minds she should take a seat or wait until she was invited to do so. "Please sit down, Louise," Clyde said. "Would you like a cup of tea or coffee?" "Tea would be lovely, thank you." After filling the jug and turning it on, Clyde gathered 2 fine china cups and saucers from the cupboard over the gas stove. Nothing but the best of the best for this particular guest, and something that didn't go unnoticed when he placed them on the table. "Oh my, they're exquisite," Louise said. "Thank you," Clyde said, impressed. "They are, aren't they? I only use them when I have VIPs paying me a visit. I wish you happened to be the first." She blushed, and for the umpteenth time Clyde thought, "How I wish I was 40 years younger." "Now," he said, taking the chair nearest to her. "Time for the unveiling." Clyde was excited as a child on Christmas Day morning as Louise gently gripped the cover. Her hands, he thought, exquisite as the china he had it placed on the table. Remarkable too, considering the work she did. I hope you like it," she said, gently raising the cover. "If you're happy with your work, Louise, then I'm sure I will be too." But when the cover had been removed and now lay neatly folded on the table, Clyde wasn't happy with what he saw. Not happy at all. No, he was overwhelmed by what he saw. So overwhelmed, in fact, that for a moment or two he was speechless. The silence Louise obviously thought as an omen of discontent, for she said, You don't like it." "Like it?" Clyde said, incredulously looking at her. "Like it? My dear young and incredibly talented friend. I marvel at it. It's a masterpiece is what it is. And if you continuously produce work of this calibre, then your success is guaranteed. Now it was Louise's turn to sit in silence. And as she sat feeling, well, she wasn't sure how she was feeling. Relieved, ecstatic, humbled, excited, over the moon, euphoric. Any and all of those things. She listened as Clyde continued. You have made me fit to display among the noble and aristocratic of the world you have. I always thought I looked like Basil Rathbone, but now I think, seeing myself in 3 dimensions, I look like the Roman Emperor Caesar, Julius Caesar, and I like that. I like that a lot. Thank you, Louise. I will treasure it always. When my readers see this bust in my latest book, you'll be so busy you won't know if you're coming or going. You'll mark my words. With the jug boiled, Clyde excused himself and left the table, leaving Louise to absorb what he had said and knowing exactly how she felt, exalted and elated. With the tea made, Clyde asked if she wanted milk and sugar, but Louise didn't hear a word, so far away as she was with her contemplation. Clyde smiled, waited a few seconds, then cleared his throat to gain her attention, and when she didn't respond, he cleared his throat again. And it was then she said, "Oh, sorry, I was miles away." "Perfectly understandable," Clyde said. "But would you like milk and sugar?" Sugar. No, I mean milk. Milk, please, no sugar." Minutes later, a china bowl resting on the table, resplendent with its cargo of fine biscuits, ginger nut, Scotch finger, arrowroot, and Anzac. The tea poured, Clyde said, "So, my young friend, now that you're back on terra firma, what do I owe you for your splendid creation? And don't you dare say any ridiculously low price, because I won't have a bar of it." But Louise didn't answer. "You have done your costing, haven't you?" Clyde asked, matter-of-factly. "Well, I see. But you know how long it took you to make it, I assume?" "Sort of." Clyde sipped his tea. Louise did the same. Then in unison they both lowered their cup and gently placed them on the saucer with the respect they rightfully deserved. And only then did Louise say, "I got so carried away with what I was doing, and with work as well, I lost all track of time. Truly I did." "Never mind," Clyde said sympathetically. "We can work on it now if you have the time." Louise nodded and said, "You probably think I'm a scatterbrain, don't you? And who could blame you, what with all the advice you gave me?" "I would never think of you so," Clyde replied. "Let's just say you lack experience with this sort of thing. Starting a business isn't the walk in the park many people think it is. Not by any stretch of the imagination. But you'll learn. To that I have no doubt. And if you don't, you'll only have yourself to blame and you'll fail. It's as simple as that." "I'm not feeling as exalted and elated as I was anymore," Louise was thinking. "But he's right. He's oh so right. And if... Oh, Louise, you silly duffer, why do you take the time to keep track of time, for goodness sake?" "So," Clyde said, "let's get down to the nitty-gritty, shall we?" "I'll try," Louise said, but by the tone of her voice she was anything but optimistic. Half an hour and 3 cups of tea each later, Louise seemed to be satisfied with the figures, whereas Clyde wasn't so sure, and he said, "You know, Louise, and speaking as a novice, but I find it hard to believe that you created this piece in a mere 10 hours. Honestly, I do." Holding up a hand, Clyde continued, "If I were to see this wonderful creation in a shop window, and it had an asking price of $800 on it, I would think it was a bargain. So as far as I'm concerned, $800 is what it shall be. No ands, ifs or buts." "It's too much," Louise was thinking. "Way too much." But she said, "Oh, Clyde, I wouldn't be brave enough to ask so much for my work. It's... "But you must, Louise, you must. What you're doing requires an enormous amount of skill, and the cost of that end product must take that into account. You see, it's not just the actual hours worked you must be paid for, but also for the uniqueness and quality of the end product. In other words, you're a specialist, and specialists get paid accordingly. Do you understand?" I do now, yes, Louise replied, and from now on I'll be diligent, very much so. Excellent. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll just go and fetch your fee. Won't be long. With the kitchen to herself, Louise excitedly whispered, $800? $800? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Then she hugged herself as if the most handsome man in the world had just asked her out on a date. In his bedroom, Clyde opened the top drawer of his bedside cabinet where, lying secreted under a pair of socks, he always kept $2,000, $2,100 bills. Some would call it emergency money, and he supposed in one way it was. But Clyde looked upon it as being GST avoidance money to pay for the odd jobs that needed to be done now and again around the house. By God, but how he hates having to pay GST. And besides, cash money speaks all languages, and he has never met a tradesperson who didn't like to be able to fold a wad of bills and put it in their pocket, no questions asked. With the 8 notes in hand, he stepped into the hall and hesitated, thinking that maybe he should put the money in an envelope. But then he decided not to, reasoning that if he placed cold hard cash on the table right before Louise's eyes, it would surely be the wake-up call of all wake-up calls she desperately needed to get her priorities on the right track. He did, and Louise's eyes opened wide at the sight of it. And Clyde said, "That, my young friend, is what any and all businesses are about, and don't anyone tell you different." Yes, you're right," Louise said. "And when you see that sort of money lying there like that, there because of these," raising her hands, "it certainly does put everything into perspective. Thank you, Clyde. Thank you for everything. You are welcome as always. And there is another reason why you must maintain a pricing policy, even though it's early days yet, and that's because you might need to become an employer. And if when that happens, particularly when a business is in its infancy, nothing will kill it quicker if you are forced to increase your prices in order to pay wages. You'll get away with it if the business is well established, but otherwise you won't. So please, always bear that in mind." Louise nodded and said, "I will. I promise you I will." "I'll hold you to that promise, Louise," Clyde said. "You just see if I don't." Escorting Louise to the front door, then saying goodbye, Clyde returned to his office where, standing before his desk, he glanced at the prints resting on the desktop and dismissed them after not seeing anything unusual. Sat down, lifted the mouse clear of the pad, then put it down, ordered with the screen of the screensaver, one where brightly coloured geometric shapes orbited the screen as they continuously changed shape, and one that Clyde at times found somewhat mesmerising. Damn clever he thought it was too. He then began to read, repeating the last sentence. He had tucked us into bed that night, only returned several minutes later with 2 mugs of hot chocolate that, unbeknown to us, he had added an opiate. And as we had sipped, he told us a story, as he waited for the narcotic sleep he knew would quickly come. When I woke the next morning, I felt heavy ahead and disorientated, a condition in which Harriet said she felt too. I remember Mother calling us for breakfast, but we disregarded her, preferring to remain in bed feeling the way we were. Minutes later she stormed into our room and demanded we get up forthwith. And when we didn't, she about-faced and departed, only returned with a basin of water that she threw over us, a timely reminder that she had said as to who was mistress of the house. There was a beating to follow the humiliation, another reminder for insubordination. Yes, Mother, we would whimper with each stroke of that wicked whip-like stick. We're sorry, Mother, each time she drew it back. Her face of one as if possessed with the demon blood Father had let from us. She refused us food that day, punishing, she said, for the evil that resided inside of us. We could only acquiesce in silence. Yet she always maintained that she was a good Christian woman, and Father a God-fearing man. But we rarely saw that charity in them. Maybe that's why they became interested in the supernatural, the occult, and all things as mysterious as religion itself. 6 of one and half a dozen the other, as Sandy would say. And so it went on, year in and year out. a part of our lives that was so different from the lives we lived, that were basically like all children growing up in the late 20s and 30s. When away from home we laughed and played like all children do, no one thinking we were different except for us being twins. Our friends, at and away from home, were all girls for boys. Mother and father postulated, must be avoided like the plague if we knew what was good for us. We did. We were never allowed to visit their home just in case they had brothers, nor were they allowed to visit ours, for in mother's eyes all children were carrion. We sometimes wondered why she let us play with them, until we realised that she begrudged our very presence, our existence a bane of utter discontent. Perhaps she hoped that something untoward would happen to us, and we would never return home because of it. How disappointed father would have been if that had happened, to lose the flesh of his flesh and blood of his blood, that enabled him to satiate himself at a whim and a matter of course. And who then would mother be to satisfy her malicious self, that malefactor, the self-purported paragon of all wisdom and self-righteousness? Who? Not father, that personification of evil, that master of the house and all he surveys. Certainly not. No, not father. Not the father who held us under his narcotic influence, who bathed us and brought us hot chocolate, and who, on the night of the day we celebrated our 12th birthdays, came to our room as he often did, and for the first time introduced us to a penetration of a different kind. We were 12, yet we had lost our virginity to his finger 4 years ago, and now it was time to endure what mother found abhorrent and degrading and had put a stop to. But all we could do was submit to the debauchery, the rape, the pain, the primeval urge and lust of this incestuous copulation time and time and time again, and wishing and praying that it would stop. And when each time it was over, we prayed and prayed that we would die before it happened again. But God didn't hear our prayers and our pleadings. He never heard us at all. We stopped praying then, our faith now a thing of the past. Church ceased to be a place of worship, but a place where we had to frequent. We had no choice in the matter. To us, the parish priest was no longer a messenger of God, but just a man standing at the pulpit adorned in his white vestment, going through the motions of one for the one that didn't exist. And when we stood to sing the psalms of praise that once before we sang with zeal, we only mouthed the words in order to satisfy the steely glares of mother and father, the great pretenders, those two stalwarts of the community, those pillars of society, that could do no wrong in the eyes of those looking on, and we, the MacArthur family, for all intents and purposes, were the family others aspired to emulate, to be respected and revered. It was an illusion mother and father portrayed as easy as water running off a duck's back, and one we would never dare to divulge the secret of. So we maintained appearances. We had no choice with that either, to be seen but not heard at all the local events and occasions, hating the facade we were forced to put on and promising ourselves that, when mother and father died, we would keep to ourselves as much as humanly possible. But there was a time when we looked forward to such outings, when as little girls the promise of a day at the river to picnic and play had us ready and waiting long before mother and father had commenced dressing. So excited we were. Before father bought the car, we rode to the river in a sulky pulled by Isabella, a beautiful chestnut mare we had grown up with and who still resides with us, but of who father said should be sold while she can still fetch a price. Mother thankfully won't entertain the notion. We would miss her dearly if she would go away from us. Ruffles too. Ruffles, fluffy Ruffles, is our cat and constant companion, as black as a moonless night with jay-green eyes and a tail as long as she herself. She follows us everywhere, in and about the house, and never misses a movement we make. If only mother felt for us the way she feels for Isabella and Ruffles. On the whole, though, those times were rare. But it is only now, with hindsight, do we see that. We, at age 12, He should not be reminiscing of a time when it was only yesterday, or doing just that because, instead of looking forward to the future like other 12-year-olds do, we dare not because we know what the future has in store for us. A future without change except for the breast we will develop that Father will delight in. Bloody hell, Clyde said. And with that said, he decided he'd had enough for the time being. He needed to get out of the house and do what he had decided to do early in the morning. And maybe he'd be able to rid his mouth of the foul taste while doing it. On his feet and stretching to relieve the stiffness in his back, he noticed there were no changes to the prints and muttered, "Why am I not surprised? Got you fooled this time, haven't I?" Exiting the rear door of the house, he then made his way to the bore pump, checked the fuel tank level and, finding it 3 parts full, replaced the cap, then made his way to, then entered the rear shed. He knew there was more than enough fuel for the mower and line trimmer, but he checked both cans nonetheless, and, satisfied that was indeed the case, went on to check how much weed and feed he had on hand, only to find there was but one container, half full, barely enough to cover 1/3 of the backyard. He would purchase 3 containers tomorrow after his doctor's appointment, thereby killing 2 birds with 1 stone. After topping up the fuel tanks on the mower and the line trimmer, he slipped into his overalls, put on a pair of safety glasses and earmuffs, then cranked up the ever-reliable Ryobi line trimmer. Varrock, 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 swish, and he was away, all else forgotten as he concentrated on the job at hand. And it was a job he got immense satisfaction from, so far removed from the monotony of pushing a lawnmower. Mowing a lawn, especially one of this size, was damn hard work, whereas line trimming was a walk in the park by comparison. There was no grass catcher that had to be emptied every 5 minutes. The fuel tank didn't need to be topped up. There wasn't the need to go back and forth in order to achieve a result, and he took 1/3 the time it did to mow. Yes, he'd happily line trim any day of the week than mow a lawn. He'd happily clean half a dozen toilet bowls rather than a shower recess too. Still, they were jobs that had to be done no matter how much he didn't want to do them, and the only alternative was to get someone else to do them for him. But he just couldn't see himself doing that as yet, even though he could afford to do so. Later on, perhaps, but not now or in the foreseeable future. Touch wood. Half an hour later he had finished. The line trimmer returned to the shed, overalls discarded, safety glasses and earmuffs returned to their respective peg, hat and sunglasses on, the Honda 4-stroke starting first time as it usually did. Clyde had brought it because that's what the manufacturer guaranteed it would do, and so far it had done that without fail every time, which was a good thing for Honda that it did. Otherwise Clyde wouldn't have hesitated in taking them to task over its failure to do so. No sir, bet your life on that. But 10 minutes into the mowing, he's back to the house. He suddenly had a feeling that he was being watched. But rather than stop to look behind, he continued on until he about faced at the end of the run. And, not noticing anyone or anything, continued on toward the house, the feeling gone. But when he about faced at the end of the run, he's back to the house again, the feeling returned. And this time he did stop and look behind him. And there it was. And it wasn't it, because he couldn't comprehend what it was he was looking at. His first thought was that it was a shadow cast by the chimney, but the sun was too high for that to be so. Next, sooty residue from the chimney. But there'd been rain several times since the last time he'd lit the fire near on 3 months ago. Perhaps it was a stain that had etched into the corrugated iron. But if that was so, why was it moving? And moving toward him. All of a sudden he wanted to be somewhere else. Anywhere but standing where he was staring at whatever it was that had no shape and form and couldn't possibly be responsible for that feeling he had had of being watched. Could it? "Turn your back to it, Clyde," he muttered. "Turn round, push the mower toward the shed, then make haste to the inside and close the door behind you. Do it, Clyde. Do it now. Do it now." He did turn round. And when he had his back to the house, he had that feeling again. Forget the mower, man. Just go, for Christ's sake. Go, 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 go on, get going. Trouble was, he couldn't move. He was cemented to the spot. Heart racing, mouth dry, hands gripping the mower so tightly that his arm trembled from the white-knuckle pressure he was exerting. He was in a panic now. Lean forward, goddammit, he sputtered. Put your weight forward. Lean left or right. Fall over if you have to, but get moving, you fuckwit. But he couldn't do any of those things. Nevertheless, he kept trying, willing himself to break the bonds of his confinement that he found physically impossible to do. Seeing himself in his mind's eye moving forward, the mower moving forward too, a foot, 2 feet, 3. Gravity threatened to send him sprawling face down on the grass. Pulling his hands free at the very instant he began to fall, then running toward the shed, and that's when he felt it behind him. And as he stood unmoving, his bladder and bowels threatening to give way, he noticed out the corner of his left eye something move, and he closed his eyes, not wanting to see, daring not to see whatever it was, hoping and praying, please God, don't let it hurt me. For maybe the God he denied did exist after all. Then the strangest thing happened. The calm, the likes of which he had never experienced before, came over him, and he unwillingly opened his eyes, and there, 10 feet, 20 feet perhaps, diagonally to his left was a hovering white apparition, and he whispered, "It's an angel." And as he stared at what he thought was an angel, he also saw and knew exactly what the other was, for directly behind the angel was a pall of black smoke, and it too was hovering, floating above the bore pump, perhaps in standoff mode, good versus evil, maybe waiting to see who was going to make the next move. While all this was going on, the mower had never missed a beat, vrooming away as it rested and sending vibrations coursing through Clyde's arms, both of which he hadn't noticed until now. Not daring to nor wanting to take his eyes off the two unearthly visitors, he spread the fingers of both hands, relinquishing his grip on the mower, then worked the fingers in an aid to circulation for several seconds before lowering his left arm to his side, gripping the throttle lever with his right hand, killing the engine, the muffled sound replaced in an instant with the sound of a silence that was almost deafening. So silent, in fact, it was as if everything about him ceased to exist. And if it hadn't been for the calmness that enveloped him, he would have bolted by now, would have shot into the house, grabbed his car keys, got behind the wheel of his car and driven away, probably never to return. But instead, he waited. Another cliffhanger. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, bye for now.